Okay, we are live. Hello, good afternoon, and welcome back to the Law Entrance YouTube channel and to another session of the Hindu analysis. Today is 12th of February, Wednesday, and we are back with our session. How many of you are here with me live, listening to me? Am I audible, visible? Please let me know in the chat box, jaldi se, and then we shall begin our class for the day. If you guys are here, please let me know in the chat box. Meanwhile, I'll quickly put up the presentation for you all. Okay, here we go. Ashnur is here, Namita is here. Good afternoon, guys. Welcome to the class. Chalo, Prerna is here. अरे वाह, long time no see. प्रेरणा, बहुत टाइम बाद देखिए आप क्लास में. Pro Gaming is here. Mr. Lee is here. Piyush is here. Can you please change the timing of this session? अच्छा सवाल है ये. इस पर डेलिब्रेशन चल रहा है यार पीयूष. वी आर थिंकिंग अबाउट इट एंड मोस्ट लाइकली बाय दिस वीक्स एंड विल लेट यू नो कि अगर टाइम चेंज हो रहा है तो किस टाइम हो रहा है एंड हो रहा है या नहीं हो रहा. प्रेरणा इज सेइंग हाउ आर यू. आई एम गुड, थैंक यू फॉर आस्किंग. आई होप यू आर गुड एज वेल. बात करनी कैसे करूं? टेलीग्राम कर दो आप मुझे मैसेज. हो सकता है मैसेज खो गया हो आपका. अगर आपने किया हो तो माय टेलीग्राम आईडी इज inquisitive 5. प्लीज़ कॉन्टैक्ट मी ऑन टेलीग्राम. और किसी चैनल पे मैं रिस्पॉन्ड नहीं करता. अगर आपने ढूंढ भी लिया गलती से मेरा ईमेल या नंबर, सो टेलीग्राम पे ही बात हो पाएगी. That being said, chalo, let's begin today's class. We have enough people to start. Today is 12th of February. Let's start with our discussion. Let's look at the agenda for the day. So we have three interesting topics which we're going to discuss today. The first one is related to forest fires. So अभी कौन सी जगह पे forest fires लगे थे which were going on for a very long period of time? A lot of destruction happened. कहाँ पे हुए थे अभी forest fires? I'm talking about outside of India. Please tell me in the chat box. So this article is in context of how vulnerable is India to forest fires. India में जो forest हैं उनमें कितना खतरा है फॉरेस्ट फायर लगने का, क्या ससेप्टेबिलिटी है, कैसे हम उनको प्रोटेक्ट कर सकते हैं, ये सारी चीज़ों पे ये अच्छा सा आर्टिकल है. Then there is an interesting article on survivor trauma. Now this is an article which is having a legal standpoint and also a societal standpoint. ये आर्टिकल डिस्कस करता है अबाउट सर्वाइवर्स ऑफ सेक्सुअल असॉल्ट, सर्वाइवर्स ऑफ रेप, एंड कैसे इंडियन जुडिशरी हैज समटाइम्स टेकन अ स्टैंस वेयर let's say the accused has been asked to marry the victim to get bail. एंड उस टाइप के केसेस में क्या उनके प्रोज कॉन्स हैं, क्या उनके इम्पैक्ट्स होते हैं सर्वाइवर पे, कैसे इट कैन बी अ ट्रॉमेटिक थिंग, उस बारे में ये डिस्कशन है. तो काफ़ी डिफरेंट एंड काफ़ी इंटरेस्टिंग टॉपिक है. विल टॉक अबाउट दिस. देन द थर्ड टॉपिक इज साउथ साउथ कॉपरेशन. अब साउथ साउथ कॉपरेशन का मतलब है इंडिया का कॉपरेशन विद द global south in terms of what? In terms of climate change, in terms of climate financing. This is in context with the COP summit which recently happened in Azerbaijan. Can you guys tell me the name of the city? Azerbaijan में कहाँ पे climate change की conference, जिसको हम COP conference of parties कहते हैं, COP29 थी I think, वो कहाँ पे हुई थी अजरबैजान में? Which city am I talking about? Yes, LA, California is the correct answer for the previous question. And Baku is the right answer for this one. Pro Gaming ने मुझे दे दिया सबसे पहले answer. Okay, chalo, ठीक है. So that is the agenda for the day, and then of course 3 new words for vocabulary. So without any further delay, let's start the class. Let's look at the newspaper and see what all do we have. Manipur crisis drags on as BJP weighs its options. Options for what? Options for selecting the new chief minister after the previous chief minister N. Biren Singh has now resigned. सो अभी डिसाइड ये कर रहे हैं कि प्रेसिडेंट रूल लगाया जाए या ना लगाया जाए. प्रेसिडेंट रूल कौन से आर्टिकल में मेंशन्ड है कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के? जल्दी से मुझे बता दीजिए. Which article of the Indian Constitution talks about state emergency or president's rule? Please tell me in the chat box. On the right hand side, you can see our Prime Minister Modi ji addressing the AI Action Summit, which is happening where? It is happening in Paris, in France. This is the third AI summit. इसके बारे में हम काफी बार डिस्कस कर चुके हैं. सो मोदी जी ने बोला है कि हिस्ट्री शोज दैट टेक्नोलॉजी वोंट टेक अवे जॉब्स और वर्क, यानी कि नए टाइप की जॉब्स जो हैं इन्वेंट हो जाएंगी एंड वी जस्ट नीड टू कीप अपस्किलिंग एंड इवॉल्विंग. एंड एआई से ऐसा कोई जॉब वाला खतरा नहीं है. तो दैट वाज वन स्टेटमेंट विच ही मेड अपार्ट फ्रॉम अदर स्टेटमेंट्स. इस बारे में एक डिटेल्ड सेशन भी आपका लाइंड अप है विद सलिक सर. आई थिंक इट्स गोना हैपन टुमारो एट 6 p.m. where he'll be talking about the AI Action Summit, the Rafale deal in detail. So बहुत ज़्यादा इसमें मैं नहीं जा रहा अभी डिटेल में. Apart from that, today 6 p.m. you also have that session जिसकी मैं कल बात कर रहा था आपसे, the समय रैना controversy, the India's got latent controversy regarding free speech. FIR फाइल हो चुकी है comedians पे, and क्या उसका legal I would say nuance क्या है उसमें involved, which constitutional article is involved or which provision of BNS is involved. So Salik sir would be discussing all of that with you today at 6 p.m. So make sure you attend that session or at least watch that session once it's streamed. Okay, don't erase or reload EVM data, says Supreme Court. Okay. Then you can see full moon tradition पे, संगम में, माघ पूर्णिमा फेस्टिवल में, महाकुंभ में बहुत सारे लोग, as you can see in the picture. Okay. Sensex slides 1018 points as trade war fears hit markets. Adani stocks hold up. Trade war between whom? Trade war between US and other countries, primarily China. सो उस वजह से एक नेगेटिव सेंटिमेंट क्रिएट होता है मार्केट में, जिस वजह से मार्केट गिरता है, जिसको हम सेंसेक्स और निफ्टी से मेजर करते हैं. दीज आर द इंडेक्सेस विच टेल यू अबाउट द राइज और फॉल ऑफ द मार्केट. एंड 1000 पॉइंट्स का फॉल काफ़ी अच्छा खासा बड़ा फॉल होता है. So Adani stocks have not fallen that much, which is interesting. Trump pauses foreign bribery act in a possible reprieve for Adani and others. It's going to mean a lot more business for America. So इन्होंने एक एग्जीक्यूटिव ऑर्डर पास किया. रोज नए एग्जीक्यूटिव ऑर्डर पास कर रहे हैं ट्रम्प भाई साहब. अब इन्होंने ऑर्डर पास किया टू पॉज द फॉरेन करप्ट प्रैक्टिसेस एक्ट ऑफ 1977 फॉर एटलीस्ट 180 days until the AG completes a review of the legislation. This move may reprieve to the conglomerate Adani Group, its billionaire founder Gautam Adani and other executives who were charged by a US security exchange for Eastern District of New York in connection with the alleged bribery scheme. तो इन पे अभी रिसेंटली चार्जेस लगे थे ब्राइबरी के अडानी जी पे, एंड उससे पहले भी इनके साथ एक कंट्रोवर्सी हो चुकी है विच वाज द हिंडनबर्ग कंट्रोवर्सी. अब हिंडनबर्ग जो है कंपनी बंद हो गई उसके बाद, बट या दैट इज द न्यूज़. Then today is Magh Purnima, so happy Magh Purnima to everyone who celebrates this. Okay, city-based news we can skip. State-based news, let's see if there's anything important. Madiga leader seemed to rectify lapse as Supreme. No, this is not important. This is politics, not important. IIT Madras develops indigenous Shakti semiconductor chip. Nice. Okay. Okay, now is the editorial section, a role for India in South-South Climate Cooperation. So this is in reference with the Baku Azerbaijan Wali Climate Finance COP, Conference of Parties, and this primarily talks about Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. 6 में भी ये 6.2 की बात करता है, which talks about internationally transferred mitigation outcomes and NDCs, which is nationally determined contribution. Contribution to what? Contribution to climate change. Contribution to a fund for climate change. So to put it in very simple words, it talks about how developing countries should not be pressurized or forced to put in a lot of money in the climate action fund. Neither they should be expected to meet with very strict or stringent guidelines with respect to climate change, because they are developing countries. On the other hand, developed countries like the US or for that matter even China, who are one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gases and contributors to global warming, उनको ज़्यादा contribute करना चाहिए towards the climate fund, because firstly they are big contributors, secondly they are developed countries, तो वो अपने हिस्से का development सारा कर चुके हैं, and thirdly they are having that disposable money as well. So that is what this article primarily talks about from various perspectives. It talks about how India's climate policies are shaped as per Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement. So we'll talk about this in a little more detail. It talks about opportunities for the country to unlock large-scale climate finance through South-South cooperation. Countries under pressure to meet stringent NDCs can purchase ITMOs from India, generating financial resources for the climate-resilient projects and green technology development. For example, India का renewable energy sector attracted $10 billion in foreign direct investment. अब ये this is also related to your carbon credit वाला हिसाब किताब, यानी कि for example there is USA, okay, the hypothetical example, and US की जो maximum limit है कि वो कितना कार्बन emit कर सकता है, that is 100. अगर वो 100 से ऊपर जाता है तो उसको एक्स्ट्रा कार्बन क्रेडिट्स खरीदने पड़ेंगे, एंड उसके लिए उसको किसी और कंट्री को अप्रोच करना पड़ेगा जिसके पास एक्स्ट्रा कार्बन क्रेडिट्स हैं, या फिर उसको किसी और डेवलपिंग कंट्री में रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी में या ग्रीन एनर्जी में इन्वेस्ट करना पड़ेगा. तो दैट इज हाउ बैलेंसिंग हैपेंस कि यूएस ने थोड़ा ज्यादा एमिशन कर दिया लेकिन बदले में इंडिया में एक सोलर प्रोजेक्ट लगा दिया तो हिसाब बराबर. एंड दैट इज व्हाट दे आर सेइंग दैट दिस इज एन अपॉर्चुनिटी फॉर इंडिया. जैसे कि हमने $10 बिलियन का एफडीआई लिया for renewable energy, we can do that even more. So that is what the article addresses. Then it also talks about the challenges. So we'll discuss this in a little more detail. Then on the left hand side, you have an article which says Trump's tariff will not spare the US from economic damage. This we have already discussed multiple times. Perilous path, Bangladesh is displaying an intolerant streak against minorities. So this is in context with, of course, the whole Sheikh Hasina वाला scenario. And उसके बाद काफी ज़्यादा जो है dicey situation है बांग्लादेश में with respect to protection of minorities. Minorities are being killed, and that is what the article is addressing. कि human rights violation वहाँ पे चल रहा है. Legal remedy that perpetuates survivor trauma. So this is the article which I was addressing, the Allahabad High Court case where bail was granted to a man accused of raping his interfaith live-in partner on promise of marriage. Bail was granted on condition of his marrying the survivor under Special Marriage Act and arranging a deposit of 5 lakh. So ऐसे इन्होंने multiple cases के examples लेके समझाया है कि what are the problems here. The judiciary offering bail on condition of marriage to the perpetrator of sexual violence is problematic. That is what they are, propounding. कि उस पे survivor पे क्या impact होता है, how this is a conflict of interest, and much more. So we'll talk about this in a little more detail. Let's see what else do we have. Addressing the growing threat of forest fires. ये भी हम discuss करेंगे in our analysis. These are the 3 articles: forest fires, survivor trauma, and South-South climate cooperation. So पूरा editorial article हम अच्छे से discuss करेंगे. Then what else do we have? This article is about how India has put in place several policies and schemes to address forest fire management, but needs to do much more. So just एक तरीके से है ये article की. Elector surge in Maharashtra and Delhi poses par for the course. So अभी recently news आई थी कि बहुत सारे अचानक से नए वोटर आ गए हैं दिल्ली और महाराष्ट्र में. So उसी बारे में ये article है कि this is not abnormal, this is a normal surge. How will freeze on US aid affect the world? So दिस का कॉन्टेक्स्ट मैं आपको बता देता हूँ. जब ट्रम्प केम टू पावर ही अनाउंस दैट यूएस एड, जो यूएस की एक एजेंसी है फॉर इंटरनेशनल डेवलपमेंट, जहाँ पे वो अलग अलग प्रोजेक्ट्स में अलग अलग कंट्रीज में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, उनको फॉरेन एड देते हैं, वो उन्होंने पॉज कर दिया है फॉर 90 days ट्रम्प ने एग्जीक्यूटिव ऑर्डर से. अब उसका क्या क्या इम्पैक्ट होगा, लेट्स लुक एट द जिस्ट. द यूएस एजेंसी फॉर इंटरनेशनल एड वाज सेट अप एज एन इंडिपेंडेंट एजेंसी through an act of Congress in 1961. It was an attempt to align all US efforts to administer civilian foreign aid and development assistance. In India, the quantum of funding has reduced over the years, with the government of India objecting to certain aspects of condition for the agreement of grants. While health remains the main sector where US aid has been involved in India, with a funding of almost $80 million in 24, it also has interest in economy, energy, water supply, sanitation, and environmental health. So here you can see in this chart that इसके क्या क्या aims हैं: elevating poverty, disease, and humanitarian needs, and किस region में ये कितना contribute कर रहे हैं. $1.8 billion in South Central Asia, 11.4 in Africa, 3.7 in Midwest, 17.2 in Eurasia, and यहाँ पे in different countries, right? So top recipient has been Ukraine recently with $16.4 billion because of the war, of course. Then, yeah, that is what the article is about. The banality of evil, learning about Gaza from Nazi history. This is a offbeat sort of an article. आप पढ़ सकते हो, इसमें comparison दिया है इन्होंने हिटलर regime का and गाजा वाले जो conflict है उसका. Interesting article. Then economy on speedy rebound. India to remain fastest growing nation, says our finance minister. Union budget has failed to provide for Viksit Bharat, says Akhilesh Yadav of Samajwadi Party. Okay. Only empty promises, no clear roadmap, says opposition. This is all politics. We can skip this. Just not confident of HAL, says IF chief over delivery delays. Okay. Rajnath Singh tells global firms to co-develop advanced defense systems in India. Now, these are images from the Aero Show, which is happening in Bangalore. Russia offers to partner with India for joint production of the Sukhoi 57 fighter jet. You can see it in the image. इसकी एक image viral हुई थी where a Sukhoi 57 and a F-35 were standing face to face. Bangalore की photo थी एक. Okay, what else do we have? 800 apps, 3266 websites blocked due to security reasons. Okay. YouTube blocks comedy show episode after Raw. So जिस एपिसोड पे कंट्रोवर्सी हुई थी वो एपिसोड हट चुका है, यूट्यूब ने उसको ब्लॉक कर दिया है. दिस इज अगेन अबाउट द एआई समिट. 58 कंट्रीज कॉल्ड फॉर इंक्लूसिव एंड सस्टेनेबल एआई. अब इसमें यूएस और यूके ने जो जॉइंट स्टेटमेंट इशू किया था जिसमें उन्होंने लिखा कि हम क्या क्या काम करेंगे, यूएस एंड यूके ने उसको साइन नहीं किया है. वाइस प्रेसिडेंट वैंस रेल्स अगेंस्ट एक्सेसिव रेगुलेशन ऑफ एआई सेक्टर. सो यूएस के जो वाइस प्रेसिडेंट है जेडी वैंस, वो कह रहे हैं कि इतना ज़्यादा रेगुलेशन एआई सेक्टर का हम नहीं चाहते, इसलिए हम जॉइंट स्टेटमेंट साइन नहीं कर रहे हैं. ओके. एल्स डू वी हैव? जेई मेन में 14 लोगों का परफेक्ट स्कोर आ गया, क्या बात है. 5 फ्रॉम राजस्थान. नाइस. मेरा तो अच्छा नहीं आया था बिल्कुल भी. फोन नंबर जैसी रैंक आई थी मेरी जेई में. बट ठीक है, क्लैट में अच्छी आ गई थी. Mobilizing labor for infra building getting tough. Attrition is high. Okay. Nothing interesting and important here. Let me check if we have anything else. Okay. So I think nothing else which is that important in today's newspaper. We are almost done. Yeah. Okay, so let's come back to the three articles which we are going to discuss in a little more detail. सबसे पहले हम start करेंगे by discussing with the forest fires वाला article. So as all of you are aware कि अभी लॉस एंजलिस में लास्ट मंथ बहुत ज़्यादा वाइड स्प्रेड वाइल्ड फायर्स लग गई थी एंड बहुत टाइम लग गया था उसको कंट्रोल करने में. उसी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में ये आर्टिकल है कि हाउ. ओके, मैंने प्रेजेंटेशन शेयर ही नहीं करी. oops, my bad. Nanny is saying English only, please. All right, we can do that. English only. We can stick to just English. Anyone else who is not comfortable with Hindi apart from Nanny? All of you are okay with English only? Everyone is on board if I just speak in English? That's fine. Okay, चलो. अब ठीक है. I'll be using some fillers which are not important. So Nanny, you'd have to bear with me with respect to that. I hope you don't mind that. Anything which is important, I'll discuss about that in English. Okay, I think that works. I'll try to switch to 100% English as well, but there are some things, some emotions which I better express in Hindi because that is sort of my mother tongue. But anyway, let's come back to the issue at hand. I hope the presentation is visible to everyone. Addressing the growing threat of forest fires. Now, unfortunately, forest fires have become a very major issue in the past few years because of firstly global warming, secondly rapid deforestation, and in India the situation is equally alarming. Now, according to forest survey data, which this article mentions, almost 36% of the country's forest cover is prone to forest fires. That means almost more than one third of India's forest can be susceptible or can be affected by forest fires any day. And another analysis tells that especially forests in Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh are more prone to such forest fires. And we often even hear about forest fires in these particular states. States like UK, Himachal Pradesh, MP, Maharashtra, Odisha, where forest cover is, of course, on the higher side. Therefore, the frequency and intensity of the forest fires are also on the higher side. Another report tells that 90% of these fires, these forest fires, are caused by human activities. It could be slash and burn agriculture, where after a particular crop is harvested, the remaining residue is burned, and that could result in a forest fire. It could be related to land clearing, that if you want to clear up a land, you just set it on fire. It could be related to unattended campfires, that someone set up a camp, lit a fire, and it was unattended and it spread out. So there are multiple factors, and of course, these factors coupled with climate-related changes, such as delayed monsoons, dry spells, these also increase the risk of forest fires. And this is not just a natural concern, this is also a social and economic concern, because we rely a lot on our forest resources, and a lot of tribals and forest dwellers exist in India. So, multiple, I would say, consequences and implications of forest fires in India, which are all interconnected. But the major loss is the direct loss of trees, the direct loss to wildlife, to biodiversity, to probably rare species of animals or plants, fauna, and flora. And that also, of course, contributes to a significant chunk of carbon emissions. If a forest catches fire, you can imagine the amount of carbon emissions which are emitted into the atmosphere. So all in all, forest fires are a very problematic thing to us as a species and to this planet as well. When you talk about another report by World Resources Institute, which is also mentioned in this article, it says that Indian forest fires emit 69 million tons of CO2 every year. That is a lot. And to counter this, India has, of course, put in place several policies, several schemes to address, the management of forest fires. One of them is the National Action Plan on Forest Fires. I'll write it down for you. National Action Plan for Forest Fires. So apart from that, there is a Forest Fire Prevention Management Scheme, which is FFPMS, Forest Fire Prevention Management Scheme. So these are two initiatives which the Indian government is taking in order to control the spread of forest fires in India. The FFPMS is a centrally sponsored scheme, and what that means is both the center as well as the state government collaborate and contribute together to this particular scheme in order to increase our management capabilities. Lastly, this article also tells you that forest fires are not just an environmental issue. They are societal, economic, affects livelihood, affects health, affects ecosystem, and addressing it requires collaboration between all the stakeholders, such as policymakers who make good policies and schemes, such as scientists who do their research and development to understand how can we prevent these fires, between civil society groups who create awareness among people, and of course the regular folk, the communities, people like you and me. So everyone needs to come together to counter this problem and prevent it from happening. And of course, for creating supporting infrastructure, government has to intervene. There has to be policy intervention. There has to be improved budgeting for this particular thing. There has to be adoption of technology. There has to be a building of trained people who can control this fire. Everything has to go hand in hand, side by side, and that is how we can address this possible issue. So that is what the article all in all talks about. You can read this article. It's an interesting article. Must read it. And yeah, that's all. Let's move on to the next article, which was related to survivor trauma. Now, this is an even more interesting article, which addresses a very sensitive but a very important issue, which is the promise of marriage thing in context of the victim of sexual assault or rape or other such violent crimes against women. Now, it starts with the discussion of a case which happened in Allahabad High Court, which was the Atul Gautam versus State of UP. The name of the case is not important for you, but I'm just telling you for reference, where the court said that if you promise to marry this particular victim and also pay a deposit of 5 lakh, we will be providing you bail for your offense of rape. Now, another case which they refer to as Abhishek versus State of UP 2024, same High Court, another bail granted to a rape accused on the condition to marry the survivor and take care of the newborn child. Now, this reasoning aligns with another precedent, which is another UP case, Ram Shankar versus State of UP 2022. So, a 22 case, a 24 case, and a 25 case. All of these cases, bail were granted to people accused of rape on similar grounds, that they would take care of the survivor or take care of the victim. So There are multiple issues in this sort of arrangement. First is whether the court can impose bail conditions requiring a rape accused to marry the survivor and assume responsibility of the survivor and the child. Secondly, whether the state is neglecting the responsibility to provide welfare measure for the survivor by shifting the burden or shifting the responsibility towards the accused, and of course who take care about the children born out of such crimes as well, because if a survivor of such crime is now giving birth to a, let's say, newborn child, of course that child would not be brought up in the best of conditions and upbringing. They also refer to another MP related case, which is Aparna Bhatt versus State of MP. This is a Supreme Court case where guidelines were issued for bail conditions, and the court said that courts must ensure that conditions of bail are strictly prohibiting any contact with the accused and survivor to avoid trauma. Because I mean, it's quite obvious, right? If such a heinous crime has happened against a woman or against any person for that matter, there would be a lot of trauma involved. And if you're asking that person to live with the person who is the perpetrator of that offense, who is the person accused of that offense, you are just substantiating the trauma. And the bail conditions are violating these guidelines. All of these cases in the High Court of UP are violating these Supreme Court guidelines. The court has also directed in these bail guidelines that they should not reinforce gender stereotypes and patriarchal notions on women and comply with the CRPC guidelines, which talk about how bail conditions should be in the interest of justice and in the interest of the victim. But again, such conditions are not arbitrary and they do not extend beyond the end of this provision. This sort of approach is adopted by the courts from a very regressive or backward or orthodox societal perception that a women's dignity is sort of tied up some way to her marital status, which I believe personally is not true. I believe this is a problematic approach, and so does the author, and that is why they are pointing it out that such reasoning perpetuates this problematic belief. It propagates this problematic belief that marriage is a remedy of this particular offense that can restore the sort of loss of quote unquote purity or honor or whatever you may call it, and it does not violate the autonomy of the survivor, but also legitimizes and marital relationship which should not have been initiated in the first place. So, all in all, what the author of this particular article is trying to say is granting bail on the condition of marriage during the pendency of a trial is problematic in nature. And moreover, imposing marriage between the accused and survivor as a bail condition has very problematic effects, even irreversible effects, which can alter their relationship and interpersonal dynamics. And such conditions, should not be laid down. Survivors' ability to testify freely is also affected because of this, because the survivor knows that, okay, if I speak against this particular oppressor, I am going to be married to this guy and this would come back to me. So, all in all, this is a very sort of problematic scenario which the Indian courts should recognize and acknowledge and do away with this approach. And that is what the article is all about. I think it's a very interesting and very eye-opening sort of article which every law student should definitely read, and so should you guys. Okay, let's move to the next and the third article for the day. Now, this is pretty simple. This is straightforward. As I was explaining to you, now when you read this article, you might encounter some heavy words, big fancy words. Nothing to fear about that. The simple concept is the one which I explained to you: one of carbon credits and one of the differentiated responsibility between developed countries and the developing countries. Remember, I said the word differentiated and not different responsibilities. Why not? Because everyone has a responsibility to work towards climate change, but the extent of the responsibility is a little bit different. The way they approach their responsibility or how much they contribute to the responsibility is going to be different based on the country's economic strength, based on the country's carbon emission, global warming contribution, and multiple other factors. So, this article is in context with your Conference of Parties Summit, COP29, which happened in Baku, Azerbaijan, which was also called the Climate Finance COP, because a lot of climate finance related provisions were discussed there. Adoption of Article 6 being one, Article 6 of the Paris Climate Agreement, which talks about how countries that are often constrained in terms of resources or have difficulties in achieving an sort of economy wide transition to carbon neutral economy or to renewable sources of energy, how they can receive aid from the developed countries. Now, a very important component here is Article 6.2, which facilitates this. This is important. Article 6 and Article 6.2. Now, what they're essentially talking in Article 6.2 is the transfer of internationally transferred mitigation outcomes. So, four words, let's understand it very slowly. Internationally transferred mitigation outcomes. What are mitigation outcomes? Mitigation outcomes, as I was giving you the US example, that if US is, let's say, exceeding its limit of, let's say, 100 ton of carbon emission, there has to be something which it needs to do to mitigate it, to ease down the pressure on the environment or the damage on the environment, right? Mitigation outcomes need to come out, and this mitigation outcomes can be internationally transferred. That is, US can transfer its mitigation outcomes to a different country by investing in that particular country, by using the concept of NDCs, which is nationally determined contribution, which provides you a flexibility of having a customized agreement or a tailored agreement where you can invest in such developing countries and help them reduce their emission. And in this whole scenario, you are going to achieve your mitigation guidelines. Okay? So that is what this article is saying, that India, which is also one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gases, to be specific, third largest emitter of greenhouse gases, that India can benefit a lot from Article 6.2 because we are facing a lot of challenges. Firstly, in our developmental goals, and secondly, of course, with respect to financing related to climate change. We are already short on funds, so we don't really have a lot of disposable money to invest on climate change and to invest on renewable energy. So, when you talk about India's NDCs, we have ambitious targets like reducing our emission intensity by 45% till 2030. But when you talk about the financial and technical constraints, they are very pertinent to look at, because again, India in the COP29 summit also asked the developed countries to mobilize at least $1 trillion per year in climate financing for developing countries, including India. So that is what the article addresses, right? India pushing the South-South cooperation, which is the global North and the global South coming together, and especially India being a big power in the Southern Hemisphere or the global South, need to cooperate more with the Southern countries and other developing nations in order to procure this climate financing from other developed countries. So basically, South-South coming together to take money from the North. That is what the article is trying to address. Basically, the concept of common but differentiated responsibilities. So everyone has a common responsibility but differentiated responsibility. That is what the article tells you. Okay. So make sure you read this article. It's an interesting one. These type of articles often form questions in the actual exam. So make sure you don't miss at least the climate change and global warming related articles at any cost. And the legal articles as well, like these ones. These also often form questions in the exam. Now let's look at vocabulary for the day. The first word is counterfeit. Counterfeit simply means, in Hindi we call it nakli. In English, the meaning could be which appears to be original, but it is made with an intention of committing fraud. So you can call it fake, forged, or false. Many times you might have heard the word counterfeit currency, counterfeit notes, counterfeit coins, counterfeit documents. So counterfeit means something which is not original, which appears to be original in order to commit fraud, but it's fake. Antonyms are real, genuine, authentic. He admitted to processing and delivering counterfeit currency. That's the first word. The second word of the day is motive. Motive simply means a major object of interest or concern. You might have heard this word in English literature many a times when you study motives in a particular story or in a particular poem. Now, motives are, in terms of literature, themes or topics which appear again and again to signify a particular intention of the author or to signify a particular theme which the author wants to portray. For example, if the author, let's say, wants to portray a theme of sadness, he might he might use a motive of, let's say, dead leaves, or he might use the motive of darkness, he might use the motive of loneliness, such thing, right? So a major object of interest or concern which signifies a theme, that is called motive. The motif of a mute figure standing in a lonely isolation is recurrent one in artist's work. So here the motif is the mute figure, which is standing in a lonely isolation. So antonyms are aside, tangent, excursion. Synonyms are theme, topic, matter. The third word is adjudicate. Now, adjudicate is a word which you would often hear in legal parlance. It simply means to give an opinion about or to give a decision in a particular case. So decide, judge, determine is what we call adjudicate. This is more towards the legal aspect of things. Antonyms can be hedge, equivocate, or pussyfoot. Sentence: he was asked to adjudicate on the dispute. That means decide on the dispute, give the decision on the dispute, or opinion on the dispute. So these are the three words for the day: adjudicate, motive, and counterfeit. And that brings us to the end of today's session. I hope this was productive. If it was, do drop a like on this and do subscribe to the channel. Do share it with all your friends. Bring more people to the session. And on Friday, we are going to have a special quiz, the Mentee quiz. This week's Mentee is going to be a surprise topic, so you can't really prepare for it. But I'm sure you would join in big numbers. That's all for today, guys. Thank you so much. Take care. Keep learning. Keep preparing. I'll see you all in the next one. Till then, bye bye. Signing off.